Thank you, everyone. This is a little bit of a different meeting than we will be having at 7 o'clock. We have 2 public hearings and then an interim superintendent update. For each of the public hearings, because it is a separate public hearing, there are public comments for each of those. We are not going to require comment cards, but if you have a public comment for the breakfast program, you may have those, use those at the appropriate time. For the student internet policy at the appropriate time. And then if there's anybody that wants to make a comment regarding the interim superintendent update, since that one is separate, we are having the comment cards in the back there that you may fill out and use, and will be brought up to me, and we will do the cards like we regularly do just for that portion. And I ask that those cards, if you have a public comment, that it be contained only to this interim superintendent update. Anything else that's not related to that, we will be able to cover in the public comments out there. We just have a very short time frame here to get done before we start that meeting on time. So hopefully that is clear for everyone. So the first public hearing is on the 2023-2024 breakfast program. This is a public hearing to consider that program. Dan, can you please provide a little information about that?
Yes, under the federal rules with the National Student Meal Program, we are required to conduct this hearing annually, and Mrs. Anise is going to introduce this topic and provide a brief overview.
Thank you.
There's a button there.
Thank you. Jeremy always has my back. So schools are mandated to offer a breakfast program if we have over 20% free and reduced count in any individual building, and that's what we've been doing for a number of years. We did serve over 28,000 breakfasts in Eastern Middle High, Meadowbrook, Northern High, Northern Hills Middle, Northern Trails, Orchard View, and the Transition Center this past year. The food service program is recommending for the coming year that we add Collins to the list of schools that will be offering a breakfast program, and are recommending, based on low free and reduced count and anticipated low participation, that we would exclude Central High, Central Middle, Central Woodlands, Goodwill Environmental, Ada Elementary, Ada Vista Elementary, Knapp Forest, Pine Ridge, and Thornapple Elementaries. Any questions?
Did you say you're excluding?
We would not be offering free breakfast or breakfast programs at those buildings that I just listed. Happy to list them again if you'd like.
Yes, please.
Okay, so the buildings that we would not be offering a breakfast program are Central High, Central Middle, Central Woodlands, Goodwill, Ada Elementary, Ada Vista, Knapp Forest, Pine Ridge, and Thornapple, based on low free and reduced count in those buildings. Collins has not had a breakfast program before, but we would be adding them to the breakfast program this coming year.
So you're adding one school and getting rid of how many?
Not getting rid of any.
Or not, you're just excluding it?
Correct, and they've been excluded in the past also.
Okay.
Yep.
Could I ask you just to clarify, are the buildings that they're included in, they all have greater than 20%, or just the fact that one of ours means we have to offer a program and then we decide where to put it throughout our district?
We're only mandated to offer if it's over 20% free and reduced.
Yeah.
But if buildings are getting close, we will often include them in the program.
Got it.
So Collins is getting to that point where they're a little bit closer, so it made sense to include them in the program.
Thanks.
Yeah. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Are there any public comments regarding the breakfast program? Okay, thank you. Can I then have a motion, and we'll do this in the negative, unfortunately. Can I have a motion to not operate a breakfast program at Forest Hill Central, Central Middle, Central Woodlands, Goodwill, Ada Elementary, Ada Vista Elementary, Knapp Forest, Pine Ridge, and Thornapple Elementaries for the 23-24 school year?
So moved.
And do I have a second?
Second.
All right, should we do a voice vote on this one, Val? Okay, voice vote, please. Roll call.
Dr. Marchand?
Yes.
Mrs. Neinmeyer?
Yes.
Mrs. DeBoer?
No.
Mrs. Monk?
Yes.
Mrs. Cavell?
Yes.
Dr. Clausen?
Yes.
Mrs. Ryan, yes.
Okay.
All right, the next item that we're required to conduct an annual public hearing on has to do with the student internet policy and the requirements under the Children's Internet Protection Act. And we have our Director of Technology, Susan, here to talk with us a little bit about this law and our requirements. Thank you.
Good
Susan.
evening. The Children's Internet Protection Act, more commonly referred to as SIPA, was passed by Congress in December of 2000. The purpose of this act was to address concerns regarding internet filtering and safety measures to protect students from inappropriate materials on the internet, and also to establish policy for schools and libraries receiving discounts for internet access through the federal E-rate program. The basic requirements of SIPA are that schools must filter or block internet access to images that are obscene, deemed pornography, or harmful to minors, and districts must also hold a public meeting and adopt an internet safety policy. For schools that are subject to SIPA, they must also certify that their internet safety policy addresses monitoring of online activities, and the policy must include measures for safety and security of minors while using electronic communications. The policy must address safety and security regarding unauthorized or unlawful access, as well as the disclosure and use of personal information. Forest Hills certifies and complies that we meet these requirements in the following ways. Content Keeper is used to filter district computers and users, both on-site and remotely. Internet Safety Policy 3116, the District Technology and Acceptable Use Policy, addresses the supervision, the monitoring, and education of minors. And Forest Hills prohibits the unauthorized access, use, and dissemination of personal information. And we have issued notice and conduct this public hearing annually. Are there any questions?
I do. When you're talking about content, is it only visual content or is it verbal content as well that they'll be blocking from the students from?
It is written and imagery.
And what would be considered, it's on the other page, what would be considered inappropriate written content? Like,
I can read it from the policy.
okay,
So,
thank you.
Okay, the term harmful to minors, it talks about this, says depicts, describes, or represents in a patently offensive way as to what is suitable for minors or actual or simulated sexual acts, sexual contact. It also taken as a whole lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value, or taken as a whole and as to minors appeals to a prurient interest in nudity, sex, or excretion.
So this is putting a firewall in place for that to keep
This
the
is
kids
in-
from it?
In addition to the firewall, this is content management or content, it's called Content Keeper, to put those blocks in place. Most are by category. The internet is kind of segmented that way too. So there are appliances, different cloud-based programs and things like that that already categorize this based on the Children's Internet Protection Act. So a lot of those are done in groups like that, in categories.
Does this pertain also to their personal use of the phone, or is that on the separate thing with the student handbook to coincide with this?
It is internet access that's provided by the district, so it would be our internet access through the wireless or through connected network.
Okay, so if a student of ours goes down into our library and takes a picture of one of the books that's been in question all year round and then transfers it to another student, how does that factor into what this is all about? I'm just, because it's actually verbal, depicting sex, a lot of things that you just described. I was just curious that if we have a student taking a picture of something in the library or in one of our classrooms that's offering a book club that has content in it that might be questionable. I'm just curious to see how does that transpire with it, because I think that's in our student handbook as well too, correct?
The content that is filtered would just be the content that's being transferred across the internet. So if it was typewritten or if it was a picture that was taken from the internet, I don't have information on how that would apply to a picture taken on a phone or with a camera, as that typically isn't transferred across the school's network or through the wireless network.
Because I believe it's in our handbook, right? That
Yeah, so
students-
this covers content that comes through the internet and our requirements to make sure that we're filtering that and items that would come to end users through the pathway of the internet.
But how does that, I mean, not to jump on this, but we have written word in the books that could get transferred through the internet as well too, when the same laws or the guidelines apply for that as well?
It depends, I guess, again, how the student would be transmitting that. This is really about sites and content that comes from the outside into our network on that, and that's where the requirement is. If a student is texting something to another student, this policy doesn't cover those pieces on that.
Which is the stuff that would be in our handbook.
Right, yep.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Okay, are there any public comments on the student internet policy?
This must be extremely painful to be hypocrites up here. The internet and the obscene material that you guys are abiding by, there's also MCL law that protects the kids from the obscene and the profane material as well, from which you seem to not care about. So the old term that I used to use is called hypocrites. Every one of you are hypocrites. When you can abide by this law and choose to ignore other laws that protect our kids from obscene material, that's a hypocrite. I said this to you last year. We talked about books. Dan put all the same books that we agreed were obscene material, and they broke the law. You guys are breaking the law, but yet choosing to decide what law you want to follow. Thank you.
Any other comments on the internet policy?
Hi there, I have two. One is, I'm curious, I looked at the agenda today, and none of the backup that was just presented was made available. So not knowing I didn't even know what I was coming to hear about, and I'm curious. One question I have is I'm curious, I don't even know how many of y'all can vote on this if you all don't have access to this stuff either. And if you have access to it, why don't I have access to it? So I'm a little surprised that there's no backup to any of this, and I just kind of get a presentation by someone from the district. It just seems a little alarming that the constituents don't have the ability to view this material unless they come to this meeting and get a presentation, and then we're supposed to be able to formulate a comment within the 30-second presentation or whatever that was that we got. That just it doesn't seem open, it doesn't seem transparent, and as a parent, that's alarming. Second question, or I have two questions, actually. One is, I'm assuming, just going off what I heard, because again, I have no backup, Content Keeper, is that a software that we use? Is that a software that we're using? Or is that just some coin term like Kleenex? I don't know what Content Keeper is. And is that the system already in use, and this is just a renewal of that contract? Second question that I have is who controls what's blocked and what isn't blocked? So who's the gatekeeper? Who's got the keys to this car here? So is that this content keeper that controls what comes through and what doesn't come through? And is that something that it can and is modified by the school district? Can people add to that? Can that be removed? And then what's that process like if you want something that's not currently blocked to be able to be blocked and something that's not blocked to be removed? How do we navigate all of that? As you all know, the internet is something that changes every day exponentially. So trying to keep up with it really involves every parent, every citizen, every community member within the school district. So how can we be more involved in that? I hate to use the word policing, but controlling the content that comes through the internet. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments regarding the internet policy?
I just wanted you all to know that last fall I had reached out to Eric Stanek, who is the tech director for Lowell area schools, regarding the SIPA compliance because I had some concerns. And I started with some screenshots of some books that have questionable content that we brought to your attention. And I just said, you know, I'm just curious about the student access to material such as this. And his response was, holy crap, that is a problem. We can't have that going on in our schools. How did they get a hold of that? And I said, our schools are serving this up to our kids through our internet. And it is coming through the internet. It's coming through our connection to Destiny, the online library access. It's coming through Sora on these kids' phones. And there is pornography, visual. There are pictures of sexual acts, as well as verbal descriptions. Parents need to have a better way to police what their children have access to. It is not up to the school to decide that. And if you can't fix that, you need to turn off that access until we can get it figured out. What was sad is that once Eric forwarded my email to Nate Fowler, his tune changed. And the next board meeting, lo and behold, was a presentation about how the district is SIPA compliant. And I did file a complaint with SIPA, and I'm still waiting for a response from that because this is not okay. None of you should be okay with this. Thank you.
Any other comments?
I can't help but notice that in one of your slides, you've listed a credible source as commonsensemedia.org, which when I spoke with Scott Hayden many months ago, he stated there was no particularly good source to vet books. I'm going to assume that since you have listed that as a source on an official slide, that I can use that to help with the book review process and book reviews. That's all I've got to say.
Anyone else?
Can I just thank you all for sitting here and listening to this month after month after month, and for not being hypocrites and resisting the hypocrites in the group that say they're all for parental rights but are ignoring the majority of parentals. Most of us, through our votes, through failed recalls, through all of this, have said we trust working with you guys to get anything that may not be good for our libraries out of it. There is no pornography in the libraries. Just because somebody thinks it is.
Just wait till I read, lady.
I've seen it. I've seen it, Victor.
Please direct your
I've seen
comments
it.
up here to the board.
So I just want to thank you, and I'm so sorry that the Just Group is at it again. But we're working together with Algoma and Lowell to stop this and to make it so these are productive again and not just ways for people to come up and name call. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, the next item on our agenda is the superintendent update, and I know we only have a couple of minutes before we have to get into our 7 o'clock meeting, but I will pass it over to Mary here to give us an update on where we are with that.
Are y'all voting on that?
No, there's no vote. It's simply a public hearing on how we comply with the SIPA policy. There's no vote.
Okay, update. Since our last meeting, we discussed the fact that we needed to get an interim. By state law, the only position we must have employed in this district is a superintendent. Our revered superintendent would like to move on June 30th, and one of the crazy laws in the state of Michigan, in addition to him not being able to be employed or receive any payment to serve a public school for 9 months, he has, for lack of a better term, a gag order for 30 days. So if Superintendent Beam retires June 30th, he effectively cannot communicate with anybody in our schools, transition anybody, an interim or anybody else to help keep the boat afloat for 30 days. As we looked into this a little more, if we extend this process to July 31st, which he very kindly said he could do if he absolutely had to, we now have a superintendent who cannot interact with an interim superintendent for the month of August, which is when we start school and everything, revs up again. So it kind of became evident that it would behoove us to bring this to the board ASAP. As we mentioned at the last meeting, we had a nice list of potential interim candidates from the MASB, from Jay Bennett, who came and did a little tutelage with us. We have had the good fortune of being able to interact with retired superintendents and administrators from Forest Hills, and some superintendents who have just been amazing guardian angels throughout the county and the state to just lend their experience and wisdom to helping navigate the timing and the process to bring an interim into our district. So we processed a pretty significant list and found 6 people that seemed to be recognized by, or a history that was familiar to most of the people we were talking to. In reaching out to them, 2 of them right away said, I'm just at that stage in my life that I'm not interested in doing this. Most of these people are retired. They have already served in this role, and this is something they do, you know, is for a short term to help districts stay afloat. Of the 4 left, one of them was a gentleman who has already served in an interim capacity 3 or 4 times. He was delightful, and we figured this was going to happen, has already served in Caledonia, and Caledonia has recently seen their superintendent move on to Kalamazoo, so he will be returning to Kalamazoo. All the reasons why he would have, Caledonia, sorry, too many schools. But he, you know, we admire that he recognizes he has something to bring to the table, so he's not an option. Of the other 3, one of them would only like to serve 3 months, 6 months max. The way we are playing this out, as you may recall from our search firms, is we heard loud and clear that it would not remotely be in our best interest to try to pull this off before the school year starts again. So one possibility is we find somebody that is able to transition out of their district and join us January 1st. That's maybe a 50-50. Worst case, the actual process tends to take place, that cycle seems to kick into gear starting January of 2024. And so we could look at the possibility that we could have an interim in our ranks through July 1st of 2024. So we now have one person that is moved on, one that is not interested in our time frame. We had 2 left, and what I've heard loud and clear from superintendents that are supporting us, from Jay Bennett, who met with all of us, this is not a traditional interview process. This is people coming in to try to support our team and set us up for success as we move on to our next chapter. So what seemed appropriate was to introduce to you the first candidate who checked all our boxes, is comfortable with the time frame, has great familiarity with our district, our community, our county, and is passionate about coming in and helping set us up for success. So what we're hoping to do is introduce Sarah Schubel, who is with us tonight, and let you all hear a little bit about who she is and why she's here. And then if you have a couple questions, we'll have to see if we can pull this off in 5 minutes. Otherwise, we'll look at a plan B. But let's at least let Sarah share who she is.
I thought I talked really fast. Mary takes the
But
I can speak really fast. Hopefully you had an opportunity to, well, first, thank you very much for inviting me here. It was great to be able to be part of Dan's celebration, and I think highly of Dan, and I could go on with my 5 minutes just thanking him for the work that he's done. But I hope you had an opportunity to look at my vita, which I gave just a general overview of some of the work that I've done. My most recent position in education was as the superintendent of East Grand Rapids. And I was there 12 years. Dan and I got hired probably about 2 months from each other. So we both followed long-term superintendents. Mike Washburn was here 23 years. Jim Morris, Dr. Morris was in East Grand Rapids for 25 years, so no matter what you did, when you walked in the room, there was change. And in my case, it was because I was female, and I was Hispanic, and so the list goes on and on and on. So, but we're both very fortunate to have served districts that are used to longevity, and that is not the norm in superintendent positions. At a national level, it's anywhere between 3 and 5 years. So I applaud you as a district, as a board, and as a community that you have understood the importance of having stability in a district. So 17 years is amazing, and I applaud Dan for that. 12 years at East Grand Rapids. Prior to that, I worked 15 years for Ingham Intermediate School District, and I was able to stay there almost 16 years because they were able to continue to instill in me challenges. So every 4 years or so, I got a new opportunity to continue to grow as a leader, and so I was able to stay there, and I loved it. I think I told Mary the day that I was leaving, I cried from the minute I left my house. I went through, a coffee shop, Starbucks, and I was paying, and I was crying so hard in the car. Barista said, "I'll pay for you, don't worry, you don't have to find the change." And I said, "It has nothing to do with that. I'm leaving an amazing team," and you do. You leave an amazing team when you've been working with them, and I know Dan's gonna be feeling that. Fast forward 12 years later in East, I had the same reaction. I was sad to leave an amazing district, and with staff and community members that I was able to build relationships with, very strong relationship with board members, that I feel very confident that we could have strong conversations, but all work together toward continue to move a district forward. So. Again, and then prior to that, I worked for the Department of Education. I was part of when school improvement was a brand new term in the state. So I worked all over the state with understanding what systemic systems look like. What does that mean in a school district? How do you go about getting accreditation? How do you set yourself up for success? Did a lot of work with, as a district, you do financial audits every year. I did curriculum audits, so you have to step back and review your district. So lots of work. I could go on and on and on. That's highlights of my professional career. I do have my PhD, as you can see, but that was really for a personal growth. It wasn't when I finished. Everyone kept saying, "Well, you're going to be a superintendent now," and I'm like, that wasn't why I got it. I got it because I'm really a learner. And I told Mary, I said, I think if you'd ask staff and community members and former board members, they describe me as a learner. That's how they would describe me, as a learner. I'm always curious. I want to know what's best practice. I want to know how to continue to move a district forward. And sometimes that is really challenging when you're in a high functioning district, as you are here. And so, but it's important because you want to continue to look at long-term where you're going to continue to grow to meet the needs of all of your students. I served at a national level. ASCD is an organization that is really well known for educators, and I was fortunate that I got to be involved with that. Again, it's because I had mentors. I had mentors since I was in undergrad and then in grad school, and people who wanted to continue to see me grow. And so I'm passionate about public education. I have, as I said, with ASCD, I ended up serving as their international board president. I got to travel and do educational studies around the world to see what educational systems look like. What are best practices that other people are using? Why are we not practicing those? How do we get those? How do we study them? How do you make sure that we start to look at education from a different lens? So a lot of that, and I could go on and on about that, lots of opportunities, and I know our time is close.
We are now reconvening the special meeting that we had to put on hold in order to hold this meeting. I believe we got through all of the items that we needed to on that agenda, with the exception of the comment cards. So we will move immediately into comments. First up, Jean Stojak. Jean?
My name is Jean Stojak. I live at 475 West Abbey Mill Drive, Southeast Ada, Michigan. And I would like to start out by saying that I agree with Holly. I think this process to pick a interim superintendent is alarmingly fast. I'm very surprised that such an important decision, that it's not been planned in such a way that there's more time to learn about the candidate or candidates. And Oh, you know, I forgot. First of all, I want to congratulate you, John Beam, on your retirement. I'm sorry. I would like to do that. Yes, and I know that the board has said that they plan to be more transparent this year. I don't think this is very transparent when the votes are taking place at 10:30 at night. And here we are. What time is it? I've been receiving messages from my husband and my grandson. They're worried about me. They're wondering, what in the world is she doing out this late at night? How transparent is this? Who can be here now? I would also like to comment on the comment cards. I have actually taken a step before this. I have sent email messages to 2 different members of the board, and they respond, but they don't address the specific issue or the specific complaint that I made. It's I guess you'd call it a spin. It's an answer, but it doesn't address the issues. One of them, I think I emailed 2 or 3 times, the other once or twice. So I agree with other people who have spoken that I feel this card policy is a suppression of free speech, and I object, and I would just ask that you would reconsider and make this a policy that's more flexible, makes it more possible for people in this community to be heard. And that is all.
Thank you. Kevin Donovan.
Kevin Donovan, Ada, Michigan, 410 Green Tree, 49301. You know, I ran against some of you for the school board race, and some of you I voted for in the last school board race. I talked to you before I even voted for you. And you all spoke about transparency. Every one of us did. And what's happened here tonight is nothing short of disgusting. You should all be ashamed of what you've done here. There was nothing on the agenda that advertised that you were going to vote to hire someone as an interim superintendent. It wasn't there. It just wasn't. And then you take it from one meeting to the next meeting, and now you're back at this meeting. I'm sorry, but this is horrible. This is horrible policy, it's horrible procedure, and you're shoving it down the community's throat. This is probably one of the #1 complaints of parents, short of the drug and alcohol problem in our school district, is that this board thinks it's above everyone else. And we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but if someone comes to this meeting, or if there's a board member that has a different opinion than the rest, that you all are condescending to these people. It's obvious in your mannerisms, the way you handle yourself, and the way you talk. You can see it. And it's awful. It is absolutely disgusting. You all should watch a video of yourself and how you behave to one another when someone has a different opinion of you just of yourselves on the board. It's horrible. And I looked at the superintendent's website tonight and the Support FHPS group. It was really interesting because they have a whole blog on their website about how transparent the superintendent process is going to be. But you're not even following it. Dan Beam's retirement date that seemed to be a topic tonight. I don't even know when his date is. I don't even know that he's even announced a date of when he's going to retire. When this quit date is. I don't even think that's published. And you have a special spot on your website that's deemed for for this whole replacement search. Nowhere in there does it even talk about an interim superintendent. It's not even mentioned. What you did here tonight was awful. Now I want to revisit 2 other things. One, Mr. Beam and Ms. Vonk, you may recall I had a daughter that played volleyball, and we were going to do a whole bunch of things about sports around her, about my experience with athletics, and that's just fallen. I don't even know where the hell that's gone. Your new diversity, equity, inclusion person was supposed to pick it up, and the ball's completely dead. And I don't know where that is, and I really think it needs to be revisited, especially if you're going to ask voters to reinvest in sports. And I would,
Thank you, Mr. Donovan. Nick Prill.
One more thing about drugs and alcohol.
I'm sorry, you have 3 minutes.
You can arrest me.
Nick
One more
Prill.
thing about drugs and alcohol. I think one thing that would be great, and it speaks to transparency, is
Mr. Prill, if you'd like to make your comment, you may. If you're not going to come to the podium, I can go to the next person. That would be okay.
publish what the drug dogs find in the schools.
So I didn't plan to use this time, but I appreciate how the last meeting ended, set it up perfectly. So Robert's Rules of Order, which you claim to follow, requires that every motion be voted on by the body. So calling for a motion to adjourn, getting that motion, and then having it seconded, the next step is not to gavel and close the meeting. The next step is to take a voice vote. You talk about Michigan Association of School Boards and what a great resource they are for you. I encourage you, leverage our contract with that liberal lobbyist firm in Lansing. Have them come in and do a workshop on how to effectively run meetings. I watched them do it out in Byron Center. They did a phenomenal job coaching those board members on how to run a meeting. Clearly, you don't know how to do it, Dr. Fossen, and that is the prerequisite of a chair or a president of a board. We pay a lot of money to MASB. Use it, because you're sitting on First Amendment violations and Open Meeting Act violations. And if you don't do something about it, we will file a lawsuit. It will happen. So you can either clarify the policy, step down as president, or be faced with a lawsuit, because that's our next step. Also, I don't know, Mary, whether you were lying or the new interim superintendent was lying, but when Holly brought up concerns about scaring, or about, this rushed process, Mary said, we've talked to all of the potential candidates and we really liked Sarah, so we're moving forward with her. And then when Sarah was up here talking about the fact that scaring superintendents away, she said, well, that was one of my concerns. And when I talked to Mary Vonk, I asked her, have you talked to any other candidates? And Mary said, no, you're the only one we've talked to. So are you lying or is she lying? Because either way, we have a situation where we have a school board member lying to the public and fellow board members, or we have a new interim superintendent who is lying to the board and the community members. Either way, it doesn't look good, and I encourage to get some quick clarification on it. Thank you.
Thank you. David Rad? Nope, David Rad, or Raid, R-A-D-D-E. Okay. Jeff Schweitzer? Holly Raid again. Okay. Doug Lee. This is from the recess meeting. Right. Yeah.
No, it was last meeting.
That was last meeting.
One of the things that I think we should require is Tamasha James should be here for the entirety of this meeting. There's community divide, there's racism exists. She is in the heart of this. She should at least listen to the community instead of constantly walking out of the meeting from the diversity and inclusion that she creates. So we got to sit here. You have to sit here. Why can't the person creating the division sit here? I want to comment on the selection process. You put a process in place and no one got to actually write down or think about the questions they ask. One of the questions to ask them, top of my mind, that's the elephant in the room, is what was Sarah's position on the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Department? That would be nice to know what her position is. My position is it's dividing us. Each of you should start to think about that. But you don't know what her position was. At least some of us don't. We as community don't. These are questions that you ask when you're given time to vote on an intern. Intern is a position you're going to pay them for, they're going to be here, and they will have influence in our community. So this is not something that is willy-nilly in a single meeting. Take the time, there's no rush. Rush means you have something to hide. Mary, you have something to hide. You did a great job, but you know what? We caught on to what you did early on in the process. Rush it through, create urgency. We're going to lose the candidate if we don't act now. Those are all techniques to ram something down somebody's throat. Okay? Take the time, analyze it, and then make a decision. I don't know if she's good or bad, but there's questions I have about her being an intern we have no answer to because you rushed it through. Well, you haven't rushed it through yet. You only decided to decide on a salary package. You have one more vote. You don't have to vote for her. You could go through the process and actually analyze and ask the questions or come up with a list of questions so you know this person's going to be right for us. This was a hand-picked person from Dan Bean, given to Mary. Mary rushed it through. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. David Martin.
This is what happens when you require people to fill out comment cards. I wasn't going to come up here. I don't got much to say, but I'm sure as heck going to stand here and, you know, I guess like Garrett, maybe we can have a moment of silence for free speech. So let's have a moment of silence for about 25 seconds. Well, I'll go easy on you. That wasn't 25 seconds. Like I said, you know, as long as you make me fill out a comment card, I'm sure as heck gonna come up and have something to talk about for 3 minutes. Man, that is beautiful veneer. You know, I got a tree farm up north, and I know what it takes to grow a tree that has straight grain like that. I am impressed. This place is beautiful. And this is maple. That's what I grow it. This is really nice maple. Let's see. Oh, I do have some comments about the candidate. I used to hire people a lot, and you know, it would always the first person would come in, and they'd have a good-looking resume, and I'd have a great conversation with them, and I'd practically call up HR and say, don't even call the rest of them in. But I didn't do that, and the next person would come in, and it's like, oh my gosh, they're better than that last one. I'm sure glad I didn't jump the gun. And then another thing. I didn't, in the other room, when the prospective candidate was talking, I didn't hear one word about her plan to help the long-term superintendent get integrated into the job. It almost sounded like she wanted that job for a long time, because I didn't hear anything about that. It was only after a couple of questions that it was indicated that her term would only be 1 year at the most. Now, I don't know if that's on a piece of paper. I don't know if anybody in Forest Hills is going to hear that and have an expectation, because expectations don't seem to mean much anymore right now. And I don't know if that person really needs to, where is she gonna go? Maybe she can cool her heels for a couple weeks while you look for someone else. She's retired.
Mr. Martin.
She's not begging for a job.
Mr. Monhar.
This one's rated G. Oh, the importance of free speech. Let me bring to your attention Board Policy 2504, Section C, which you very conveniently provided for me. Once the president or other presiding officers have determined that each member of the public requesting to do so has had a reasonable opportunity to address the board during public participation portion of the board meeting, the president or other presiding officer will announce the public participation portion of the meeting has ended. With the new comment cards, how do you define that? You haven't put it in writing. It's subject to your whim and interpretation. The power is given to you, and power corrupts. I've worked for many groups and many companies. I've had contracts, and I've not had contracts. And I can tell you, get it in writing, and always read the fine print. You can be as loosey-goosey with this as you want. You can send me emails placating me saying that you're not violating the Open Meetings Act, but until you put it in writing, it's subjective, both here and in a court of law. I would urge you to come up with a formal policy. With that being said, I too now, not that I wasn't, but I will be filling out a card at every single meeting. I don't know, I may need to speak. You're discouraging it. But there are important things community members have to say, and they'll come up with what they need to say. We're not dumb idiots. We think on the fly, we have our questions, and we have our concerns. These are our children that you have been given, granted the stewardship of. And remember, you are working for us, not the other way around. I have entrusted children. These people have entrusted children. And I will not let their education and their upbringing be neglected or go to waste. I will claim my right to parent, and I will bring oversight as well as clarity to any sort of vagueness and lack of transparency that you may have. I've still got 46 seconds left. I'm going to give a moment of silence for the rest of it, for the miscarriage of justice in the last meeting and the lack of the freedom of speech. Good day.
All right, that is the end of the comment cards, so remarks are closed. We are at the end of a very long evening. Thank you, everybody, for being here. May I have a motion to adjourn?
I motion we adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
And just to dot an I and cross a T, let's do a voice vote. All in favor of adjourning the meeting? Aye. Any opposed? Meeting's adjourned.